For decades, everyone saw Rock Hudson as the perfect guy. Tall, super handsome, and so charming you couldn't look away. He was the movie star every girl dreamed about and every guy wanted to be. But behind that perfect smile, Rock was living two completely different lives, and Hollywood forced him to hide the real one. He wasn't just hiding who he loved, he was hiding who he really was. Back in the 1960s, when being famous felt like wearing handcuffs you couldn't see, Rock found something true, a quiet, secret love that no one was ever allowed to know about. The guy's name was Lee Garlington, a young movie extra who later said Rock was the kindest man he ever met. Their story wasn't full of fancy parties or big drama. It was impossible love whispered behind locked doors while cameras flashed outside. What Lee told the world years later wasn't just gossip. It was the truth Rock could never say out loud. The secret double life of a huge Hollywood star. Rock Hudson's climb to fame started in the late 1940s, when a shy kid from Illinois named Roy Harold Scherer Jr. changed his name to something strong and cool. By the mid-1950s, he was the biggest leading man in town, starring in huge movies like Magnificent Obsession, All That Heaven Allows, and Giant, the one that got him an Oscar nod. On screen, he was the perfect American hero. Off-screen, he was always nervous, always checking if someone was watching. Pretty much everyone in the business knew he was gay. Co-stars, directors, assistants, they all knew. But nobody ever said it out loud. Hollywood ran on fake stories. If the truth about Rock came out, his career would be over. So the studio set up fake dates with actresses, paid magazine writers to make up girlfriends, and when the rumors got too loud, his agent made him marry his secretary, Phyllis Gates, in 1955. They broke up 3 years later, and both of him ended up hurt and confused. Phyllis later said she had no idea he was gay. Rock's friends swore she totally knew. By the early 1960s, Rock was sick of pretending. The fame that once felt exciting now felt like a fancy prison. He just wanted normal stuff. Home-cooked dinners, road trips, someone to laugh with without being scared of getting caught. That wish brought him to one quiet moment that changed everything. In 1962, on the Universal Studios lot, a young extra named Lee Garlington hung around outside Rock's little house, pretending to read a magazine. When Rock walked by, their eyes met for a second. No words, just a look. And something started. Lee later said he only wanted to see what the big deal was about all the rumors. Neither of them knew that tiny glance would start one of Hollywood's most hidden and heartbreaking love stories. A year after that moment outside the studio, Lee got a phone call from one of Rock's friends. The message was short but huge. Rock would like to meet you. Lee was only in his early 20s and could not believe it. By 1962, Rock was one of the most famous men on earth. 6'4", crazy handsome, loved by millions. But behind all that, he just wanted one honest relationship. Their first hangout was at Rock's house in Beverly Hills. Lee said he was terrified. Rock opened the door, super chill, handed him a beer, and talked so gently that Lee relaxed right away. Nothing romantic happened that night, just talking, laughing, and both knowing they were walking into something risky. When Lee left, Rock smiled and said, "Let's do this again." And from that night on, they did. Their relationship grew in total secret. Lee would drive over after work, spend the night, then leave super early in his Chevy Nova, rolling down the hill with the engine off so neighbors wouldn't hear. "We thought we were so smart," Lee laughed years later. They cooked dinner together, took road trips through the South, and watched TV without talking, just pretending they were a normal couple for a few hours. They even went to movie premieres together, but always brought girls as dates to look straight. One night at a party, they bumped into Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. Paul gave Lee this little smile that said, "I know exactly what's up," without saying a word. They laughed about it later, but both knew the danger was real. Back then, coming out meant your career was finished. "Nobody sane came out," Lee said later. "We all just pretended to be straight." For Rock, hiding hurt, but he had no choice. After a crazy fan broke into his house while they were away and slept in his bed, Rock freaked out. She could have found their private pictures, shirtless photos of Lee in a drawer. and ruined everything. After that, he put up big gates and said no photos of them together ever again. Their love turned into whispers behind locked doors. Safe for a while, but fragile and already starting to fade. By 1965, the little secret world they built was falling apart. The constant hiding, the lies, and the fact they wanted different things slowly broke them. Lee was young and trying to figure himself out. He later said he wanted a father figure, someone strong to lean on. But Rock, even though he was huge and famous, wasn't that guy. He was a gentle giant, Lee said softly. But he wasn't a strong personality. Their love was sweet, but it couldn't survive the giant walls Hollywood made them live behind. When they broke up, it wasn't a big fight, just quiet sadness. They drifted apart, still caring, but knowing staying together would wreck them both. Rock threw himself into work, movie after movie to keep busy. Pillow Talk, Send Me No Flowers. Later to Brooke. He was perfect at playing the charming guy who gets the girl, while inside he was missing the only man he ever really loved. Hollywood had taught him how to smile through anything. In the 1970s, he moved to TV with Macmillan Wife and kept the act going. He dated women in public, laughed in interviews, and denied the same old rumors. Only super close friends like Doris Day and his manager knew the truth. Hollywood's golden boy was getting lonelier every year, trapped not by fame, but by fear. He couldn't have real relationships. He couldn't risk anyone finding out. The few people who got close saw a super kind guy who was quietly sad. Even his quick marriage to Phyllis years earlier was mostly a show to shut people up. By the early 1980s, Rock had pretty much accepted he would never live openly. But life had another twist coming. In 1984, while shooting Dynasty, he started feeling sick. He thought it was just stress. But a few months later, doctors told him the worst news. He had AIDS, a disease that back then always killed you. By that time, he and Lee hadn't talked in almost 20 years. When the news hit that Rock had AIDS, it wasn't just gossip. It changed the whole world. In July 1985, when everyone found out Rock Hudson had AIDS, people lost their minds. He was the first giant Hollywood star to go public with the disease, and back then it was terrifying and super stigmatized. For years, he'd been the symbol of perfect manhood, the guy who made Doris Day giggle and Elizabeth Taylor crack up. Now suddenly he was the face of something scary that people didn't understand. It wasn't just shocking, it was heartbreaking. For Lee, who had moved on and become a stockbroker, hearing the news felt like getting punched. "I was shocked," he said. "AIDS killed everybody back then." He tried to call the people taking care of Rock, but they said it was too late. Rock was so weak he probably wouldn't even know Lee anymore. All Lee could do was remember the happy times, laughing in the car, driving through the country roads with the top down, pretending the rest of the world wasn't there. Rock had always been private, but getting sick forced him to face everything he hid. When doctors in Paris said it was AIDS, he wanted to keep it secret, but he got worse so fast, the story leaked. On July 25, 1985, it became official. Rock Hudson has AIDS. People reacted fast. Some papers were cruel, some were sad. But something huge started happening. Millions of Americans suddenly saw a real human face on a disease they were taught to be afraid of. In his last months, only a few close friends visited: Elizabeth Taylor, Doris Day. They said he was gentle, brave, and finally okay with the truth, that love is worth it even when you have to hide it. Taylor later said Rock's bravery pushed her to spend her life fighting AIDS. She started her foundation for him. A personal tragedy turned into the start of worldwide understanding. On October 2nd, 1985, Rock Hudson died in his sleep. He was 59. His death ended an era, but started a conversation no one could ignore anymore. For Lee, it was the final goodbye to the man he loved long before the world knew his name. After the funeral, everyone talked legacy and courage, but away from cameras, Lee opened a book that wrecked him. In 1986, Rock's official biography came out, and near the end, Rock called Lee his true love, said Lee and his mom were the only people he ever really loved. When Lee read it, he completely broke down crying. "I just lost it. He had thought their relationship was just a short, secret chapter for Rock. Finding out it meant everything to him gave Lee comfort and pain at the same time. Comfort that he mattered, pain that he wasn't there at the end. "I've felt so guilty for not being with him," he said later. "I had no idea how much he loved me." Over the years, Lee found little pieces of their hidden life, a few photos in an old box. Most were just Rock smiling on the beach or by his car. Only one photo had both of them, taken secretly in a New Orleans bar. "He never let anyone take pictures of us together," Lee said. "Too dangerous." But there was one amazing trip, 1963 in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, because Elizabeth Taylor told them it was safe. There, they could finally relax. "We walked on the beach, took pictures of each other, drove around in an open Jeep. No paparazzi, no one knew us. We were just ourselves," Lee remembered. Those few photos were the closest they ever got to a normal life. Years later, everyone learned Rock kept tons of secrets, even from close friends. The 2023 documentary showed he had other guys, but never named them because he didn't want to ruin their lives. There was even a rumor he had a son when he was 19, before he was famous, but he never talked about it. "I like to keep my secrets," he once said. "They'll die with me." And most of them did. His quick marriage to Phyllis was basically acting. When she wrote her book, she said she didn't know he was gay, but Rock's friends were like, "Yeah, right, everyone knew." By the time he died, his private life was locked up tight, but by letting the world know he had AIDS, he broke the biggest silence of all, the one around the disease that was killing thousands. His bravery put a famous, loved face on it and made people care. Years later, Lee spoke of Rock not as a star, but as a guy who loved quietly and lived scared. He never got to live the way he wanted. When Lee himself died in December 2024 at 86 from prostate cancer, his husband Paul said, "I want him remembered as the love of my life," and Rock Hudson's. Rock Hudson's story shows even the biggest stars can live in the darkest shadows. Behind the perfect smile, it was a truth too hard to tell and a love too big to forget. For Lee, that love never really ended. It just became part of history.